The coffee cup trembled in Daniel Reyes's hand the moment he saw the eviction notice folded inside his jacket pocket, and he had exactly $11 left to make it through the week, feed his 6-year-old daughter, and somehow keep the lights on in an apartment he was about to lose. He didn't know that in less than 10 minutes, the most powerful woman in the city would sit down across from him at a splintered picnic table in a public park and change his life forever, though she had, in truth, already been changing it for years without him ever knowing her name. If you believe in second chances, in quiet kindness, and in the idea that the universe sometimes repays what it takes away, hit that like button right now, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, share this video with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this one. Now, let's get back to Daniel. Daniel was 34 years old, and 3 years earlier his wife had died in a car accident on a rain-slicked highway, leaving him alone with a 2-year-old daughter named Lily and a grief so heavy it felt like drowning every single morning. He had been an engineer once, with a steady job and a modest but comfortable life, but after Lily's mother passed, everything unraveled. He missed too many days of work grieving and caring for a toddler with no family nearby to help, and eventually he lost his job. Then came the small apartment instead of the house, the part-time warehouse shifts instead of a career, and the quiet, grinding exhaustion of trying to be both parents at once while the bills piled higher than his paychecks could reach. Every evening, after his shift ended, Daniel would pick Lily up from the daycare center that barely fit into his budget, and they would walk together through Ashford Park, the one free luxury still available to them in a life that had otherwise been stripped bare. Lily loved the ducks by the pond, and Daniel loved watching her laugh, because it was the only part of his day that didn't feel like survival. He never imagined that a woman watching from a black car parked at the edge of that same park had been watching them, in some form, for nearly 2 years. Her name was Evelyn Hart, and she was the reclusive CEO of Hart Foundation Group, a woman whose net worth made headlines but whose face rarely did, because she avoided cameras the way other people avoided fire. Evelyn had built her empire from nothing after her own father abandoned her family when she was 8 years old, leaving her mother to raise 3 children on a cashier's salary. She remembered hunger. She remembered shame. She remembered a stranger once paying for her school lunch anonymously for an entire semester, and how that single act of unseen generosity had convinced an 8-year-old girl that the world was not entirely cruel. She never learned who that stranger was, but she promised herself that if she ever had the means, she would become that stranger for someone else. That was why, 3 years ago, when a company report crossed her desk about a former employee named Daniel Reyes who had lost his job during a family tragedy, something in her chest had tightened. She read his file the way one reads an old wound. A single father. A dead wife. A toddler daughter. No family support. She did not know him, had never met him, and had no obligation to care. But she made a call anyway, one she made quietly, through a private legal trust with no name attached, arranging for an anonymous monthly stipend to be deposited into an account earmarked for a struggling single father in the city, chosen at random from a list of hardship cases her foundation quietly reviewed. She never asked which father. She never checked the name again. She simply wanted to be the stranger who paid for someone's lunch. For 3 years, that quiet deposit was the invisible thread that kept Daniel's family from falling completely through the cracks. It paid for Lily's asthma medication when insurance lapsed. It covered rent during 2 months he was between jobs. It was never enough to make him comfortable, but it was enough to keep him standing, and Daniel had spent 3 years wondering, with a mixture of gratitude and unease, who on earth was sending him unmarked cashier's checks with no return address and a typed note that only ever said, "For your daughter." No need to thank anyone. On the day the story truly begins, Daniel sat on that same park bench with Lily eating crackers beside him, staring at the eviction notice he had just picked up from his building's front office, his hands shaking not from cold but from the particular terror of a parent who does not know how he will keep a roof over his child's head. He did not notice the elegant woman in a plain gray coat approaching until she was standing directly in front of the empty seat across from him, and she asked, softly, almost shyly, if she could sit with him for a moment, because every other bench in the park was taken and she simply wanted somewhere quiet to think. Daniel almost said no. He was in no state for company. But there was something disarming in the tiredness behind her eyes, something that made her feel less like a stranger and more like someone carrying her own invisible weight, so he nodded, and she sat, and Lily immediately offered her a cracker with the fearless generosity only small children still possess. Evelyn Hart, who negotiated multi-million-dollar acquisitions without blinking, felt her throat tighten as she accepted a broken saltine from a 6-year-old stranger, because it reminded her so much of her own childhood, of small kindnesses in the middle of hardship. They talked, not as billionaire and beneficiary, but as two tired strangers on a park bench. Daniel didn't know who she was, and she didn't offer her name beyond Evelyn. He told her, without meaning to unload his life onto a stranger, about his wife, about losing his job, about the eviction notice folded in his pocket like a death sentence. He told her about the strange, unexplained checks that had shown up over the years, how he sometimes cried over them out of sheer relief and sometimes lay awake wondering if he was somehow being watched, judged, or set up for something. Evelyn listened, and something inside her chest ached with a recognition she couldn't yet explain, though a small, disbelieving part of her had already begun connecting names and dates in her mind. She returned to that same bench the following week, and the week after that, first out of curiosity, and then because she genuinely looked forward to it. She learned that Daniel had once been a promising structural engineer before grief dismantled his career, that he still sketched bridge designs on napkins out of habit, that he made Lily pancakes shaped like animals every Sunday even when groceries were tight, that he never once complained about his circumstances, only worried, endlessly, about his daughter's future. Evelyn began to see, with growing certainty, that this quiet, humble man in the park was the very same name she remembered signing off on years earlier in an anonymous file marked, hardship case, single father, deceased spouse. The universe, it seemed, was not finished with its strange design. If this story is already touching something in your heart, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment, because knowing that this story is reaching and moving real people means more than you know, and I promise the most powerful part is still ahead of us. Weeks passed, and Evelyn found herself doing something she had not done in over a decade, caring, deeply and personally, about someone outside her boardroom. She helped Daniel, not as an anonymous benefactor this time, but as a friend, quietly connecting him with a structural engineering firm owned by an old colleague, encouraging him to submit his old bridge sketches as a portfolio, sitting with Lily while Daniel went to the interview so he wouldn't have to worry about childcare. When he got the job, he wept in the parking lot, and Evelyn, watching from a distance, wept too, though she told herself it was simply relief for a friend. It was Lily, in her innocent, unfiltered way, who finally broke the secret open. One afternoon, drawing with crayons at the same park bench, she looked up at Evelyn and asked why the checks had stopped coming now that Daniel had a job, and Evelyn realized, with her heart pounding, that somehow the child had overheard enough grown-up conversation to know about the mysterious payments. Daniel froze, his eyes moving slowly from his daughter to Evelyn's suddenly pale face, and in that terrible, beautiful silence, he understood. He understood the years of unexplained kindness, the woman who always seemed to know just enough about his life to comfort him, the strange, aching familiarity he had felt with her from their very first conversation. He did not feel betrayed. He felt something closer to reverence, as though he were sitting across from the very hand of grace that had quietly kept his family alive for 3 years, disguised in a gray coat and a shy request to share a park bench. He asked her, voice trembling, why she had never told him, and Evelyn, for the first time in years, allowed herself to cry openly in front of another adult, explaining the 8-year-old girl inside her who never forgot what it meant to be saved by someone who wanted nothing in return. From that day forward, their bond deepened into something neither of them had expected to find again, a quiet, steady partnership built not on wealth or rescue, but on mutual recognition of two people who had survived loss and chosen, again and again, to be gentle with the world anyway. Evelyn became not just a benefactor but a constant presence in Lily's life, attending school recitals, teaching her to ride a bike, sitting beside Daniel at parent-teacher conferences as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Daniel, in turn, gave Evelyn something her fortune never could, a home that felt like family, a child who called her Evie instead of Ms. Hart, and evenings filled with pancake breakfasts and laughter instead of boardrooms and silence. Before we reach the end of this story, I want to ask you for something small but meaningful. Please leave a comment below with just one word describing how this story made you feel, because I read every single one, and it means the world to know these stories are truly reaching your hearts. 2 years later, at Lily's 8th birthday party, decorated with balloons in the same park where it all began, Daniel stood to give a small toast, his voice breaking as he thanked the woman who had once asked to sit beside a broken stranger on a bench, not knowing she was the very reason he had a table, a home, and a life to celebrate it all. Evelyn, sitting beside Lily with cake frosting on her sleeve and tears in her eyes, simply said that she hadn't saved them. She said that sitting beside them, all those years ago, had saved her too. And as the sun set golden over Ashford Park, the three of them sat together, no longer strangers, no longer donor and recipient, but simply family, proof that sometimes the kindest thing anyone can do is stay anonymous long enough for love to find its way home on its own. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to believe in kindness today, and subscribe to the channel for more stories just like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.